What's going on, everyone? So today we get to dive into some meta stuff, some tournaments results, and one of which being pretty exciting, I guess. Maybe not as exciting if you are all sick of the deck, but at least a return of some of the old options. And well, this was updated just yesterday, but these tournaments took place over the weekend that we just had. If you all haven't seen this already, Competitive Hub, Star Wars Unlimited Competitive Hub, this is the site to kind of track all things going on in the meta and tournaments being placed because, well, there's just a nice catalog of it. If you want to dive into any specific tournament, you can always follow the links on this website. But as for today, guys, this 1K in Kansas City had Newan Blue taking down the whole thing. And we are going to be diving into each of the deck lists here, as well as a bunch of the other tournaments here, which don't actually have specific deck lists for the most part. But we're going to be diving into it all and talking about a little bit of the meta overview, as it's been a little while since we've really talked about it. So big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. And also I have a TCG player link in the description down below if you want to pick up any of your Star Wars Limited cards. But first, the 1K. So a few other interesting ones that I want to mention. We had a Yoda blue, a Palpatine blue, and a Palpatine green show up and do extremely well as well. I am particularly excited about the Yoda blue, as Yoda blue is something that not only have people experimented with, but also is kind of just pretty good. You get to play the You're My Only Hope, which is excellent in Yoda, and you get to play a lot of the just double blue cards that are really good. Vigilance, Equalize as well can be exceptional if you're able to kill two things for 3 resources. But we also had the Palpatine blue, which is a little bit of a soft control variant, and the double green Palpatine with a lot of the new officials, which is absolutely sweet. A bunch of other tournaments that we also have to talk about. A lot of them are pretty standard. This showdown here was just a bunch of Tarkin towns. Triple CAD Bane Tarkin Town in the 5th to 8th spot. Jango Tarkin Town taking down the whole thing. We had Rey Tarkin Town, Bosk Blue, Han Yellow is the only, and Sabine Green is the only non-Tarkin Town deck. So then Jango, Rey, CAD Bane, all of which are pretty standard and pretty much top of the meta. As for the next showdown in Paris, well, a little bit different. We do see the Jango Red, we do see the Anakin Blues, we do see the Sabine Greens and Han Yellows. We have 2 Quinland Reds, Quinland Tarkin Town, which also appeared in our tournament decks that we're going to go over today, as well as a double yellow Han. The next showdown, we have ourselves Bosk Blue taking down the whole thing. We've got ourselves some really interesting ones in this one. Double red Anakin, Palpatine, new Palpatine, red, which we've seen that space deck pop off. Quinlan Green, and, well, Iden Blue alongside Palpatine Green, which is pretty insane. And then we had the Roar Claw showdown here with, well, Anakin Blues, CAD Bane Reds, Quinlan Reds, Jango Reds, and Sabine Greens, and then Palpatine Yellow taking down the whole thing. The next showdown, we've got another OG Han taking down the entire tournament, or a new Han Blue taking down the entire tournament alongside Quinlan Red, CAD Bane Red, Anakin Green, Jango Green, and Rey Red, and Palpatine Red. And then here is probably the most craziest of them all. FENNEC Red taking down a showdown alongside Jango Red, CAD Bane Red, CAD Bane Blue, Quinlan Red, Jango Red, another CAD Bane Red, and a Bosk Green. So a bunch of tournaments here, but as I said, this is like a snapshot of what people kind of want to play mixed with what the meta is, because these are all showdowns, which is why we're not really going to be going over them, because this is the only 1K that actually has deck lists associated with it, as well as a little bit more competitive. Showdowns, for those of you that have stores nearby, of course, players vary, but they're usually a little bit more casual, and I'm really not surprised to see. FENNEC is one of those meme decks, right? That every single time it's gonna pop up and be like, guys, FENNEC is not trash. It won a showdown. And every deck in the game can win a showdown. It can win any amount of different events. It's just a matter of, okay, how solid are your players at the showdown, right? And I'm not saying that any of these players are terrible or anything like that, but that helps it. And if you're a really good FENNEC player or a really good Star Wars Unlimited player, that can help it. But also, Showdowns are usually more casual. And so you're going to find that you're going to get random stuff in here. And so I'm not surprised to see a FENNEC Red show up. Same with like things like Jango Green or the new Palp Red show up a little bit more, although that one's seemingly pretty interesting. Or things like Palpatine Yellow taking down the whole tournament, or like Anakin Red alongside Quinland Green and Iden Double Blue showing up all in the same showdown. Like, these decks have not been showing up in top 8 spots really at all. For the most part, like Anakin Red, Double Blue Iden, or FENNEC. These types of things just haven't been showing up. Not that they haven't been played, but that's just how cash tournaments tend to be, is they usually won't be running for some sort of showdown prize with one of their super strongest decks. They're going to play the more fun stuff. As for the 1K, this is where we get to dive into some of the lists, starting us off with the Double Blue Yoda. And I'll move myself over here so we can actually dive into the list here. And I have played quite a bit of Yoda. Double Blue, Yoda Green, Yoda Yellow, Yoda Red. I found Double Blue, Yoda Green, and Yoda Yellow all to be a little bit better. Yoda Red seems to be like a weaker version of like Ray Red to me. But the Yoda Blue is definitely the more hard control variant. The thing with it is that you usually rely on a lot of Sentinels, and that can be a little bit tricky in metas where they have Tarkin Town or they have things like Waylay. This is pretty standard stuff. Are there any new cards? Kiadi Mundi is a big new card, is a big body, force body here as a 5/7. That can be pretty nice. A Zillow Beast as a finisher. Yep. Really like this one as well. But overall, this is pretty much the list that I was running as the Double Blue Yoda player as well, alongside things like Concord Dawn Interceptors, Arc 170s, Redemptions, Razor Crests in the Space Arena. You got like Luke's and Bendu's as your kind of late game Sentinel slash recoverer, right? Luke is the turn the corner point. You get Luke down, you kill something, it's this body that I have to deal with, and then you flip Yoda, kill something, restore more, and it's just kind of game over. Bendu is really sweet in this deck because you can actually curve Bendu into Zillow Beast, but also just be playing things like Vigilance for 2 resources or Arrival's Fall for 4, which is absolutely amazing. The 3 copies of You're My Only Hope is insane in Yoda. Insane. This is essentially like your version of Now There Are 2 of Them, and you are very consistently able to pull this off. Not that you're going to get like a Luke or anything like that every time, but it's very consistent to go like turn 1 play a thing, turn 2 your thing gets killed, you use Yoda's action, and then you play like a Kiadi Mundi on turn 2. Very common. Or if you don't get the 5 resource play, you could very often play things like Kanans or Sugi. Just get like a 1 resource cost reduction. And if you do it later on in the game, there are situations where you can go out and play like a turn 4 Luke, which is absolutely insane. Perilous Position as well. Really amazing removal and a bunch of things in the sideboard. Just a nice controlling deck. Red Quinlan. So we've seen a lot of it this weekend, and this is definitely a little bit of an interesting one. So we have a lot of kind of interesting options here, such as Grogu in the main deck, but without your Now There Are 2 of them. So normally we only see Grogu as an option to play things like the Plo Koons on turn 2 with Now There Are 2 of them. But this one's just kind of using it as a value piece. And also with the Force Throw synergies, right? Being able to activate Force Throw is a powerful effect. It's a little bit of an interesting addition. R2-D2, of course, just amazing. Plo Koon from the new set, also absolutely amazing. Those 2 cards have really proven themselves, and I'm not surprised to see them in the full 3 of each. Outside of that, there really isn't any new cards. It's just kind of curving out with a solid cunning, aggression, heroism list, and valuing the Quinlan Tarkin Town synergy where you get a card down, hit their unit, get to clear out their unit in the early game, and just get some value going that way, which is really nice. So super tempo focused and can compete with things like Jango because of that, in terms of like early game. Here's the thing. Things like Plo Koon just lose their value massively, and same with Han Solo. However, you also get a bunch of value with things like Millennium Falcons in those matchups. So it can be a little bit of a tricky one, but definitely solid. And I think Quinland Red's solid, nothing too crazy. But Palp Blue is next up, and I've had a couple of my patrons actually ask me to go ahead and dive into this list. It's been a little bit interesting. This one's running a little bit of a Separatist package, but it's interesting because one of the better Separatists that I've found in Palpatine has been things like Puggle. That's a Separatist. We have Rune Hako and Magna Guard here. And you're not also getting any payoff with the Separatists. So no droid commando here on turn 2 to ambush out, which would be interesting. But Poggle in Palp, getting the extra tokens and being able to just throw them at your opponent's units, get some damage on them, draw cards is really, really useful, especially when you're playing the full 3 of Royal Guard because it's an official. This list doesn't actually have that many officials, right? You do have the Rune Hakos and the Ularans, but you have 4. That's it. Just those 4 officials. Rune Hako is just good as a card on its own, honestly, just a 3-2. In the Palp decks, I oftentimes find myself playing just the 3 Rune Hakos, the 3 Poggles, and that's like a good enough amount of officials to really do some work. But if you want to play the Ularans or like Masamita alongside it, if you're in double green, that can be pretty sweet. This list is pretty straightforward though, right? You got Ramp, you got your early Sentinel with Calculating Magna Guard and Emperor's Royal Guard, you got a bunch of removal, and then you win the game with Avengers, Relentless, Snokes, Vaders, a Reinforcement Walker thrown in. It's pretty standard stuff. It is like normal Vigilance, Villainy, command control, like soft control. I honestly just think Kira has been a little bit stronger. It depends on the game, of course, because Palpatine can be an amazing late game tool, but on average, I found Kira to be just a little bit better than this. On the other hand, we have double green Palp, which is a very different direction, and I'm curious to see if they've made any additions. And already I could see a couple of them that are pretty interesting, including a Crate Dragon and a Tech. This one in the earlier stages of the game, this is a little bit more of what I tend to run, is like the 3 of Masamita. I think Masamita is one of the strongest ones because one of the things that Palpatine double green does struggle with is cards. So you can very much play things like your Super Laser Technicians, your commands, and if you are playing them like Resupply or things like that, but you run out of cards very quickly by ramping and being able to spend all your options. This one's a little bit different though, because it's a little bit more balanced or like spread across the place. Like you have your Veers, General Veers, with some of your early Imperial units like Yularen or Piet or, later units like Royal Guard, Phase 3 Dark Trooper, and things like that. You have the Enterprising Alliance, which is an amazing 5/5. You have the late game in Maul and Vader, as alongside Reinforcement Walker, Crate Dragon, and Devastator. But we also have some space threats in our Quinton's Assault Cruiser as another late game kind of win the game in the spaces with a big body, but a way to deal with maybe things like Ruthless Raider or Fett's Fire Spray or just big space bodies. And Consortium Star Viper, which is not a card I have been playing very often. I don't find it as good in Palpatine because there are a lot of situations where you want to use like a Salacious Crumb action, or you want to use like a Palpatine action, or you want to go ahead and like attack with Super Laser Technician so you can use another action, or like defeat your own Super Laser Technician to go ahead and get a draw card and see what you can play afterwards. It's a little bit more of an action intensive deck, and if you're just getting a 3 resource 3/3, it's meh. But if you do get the Restore 2, it can be excellent. So depends on kind of how this deck plays out, but a lot different and a lot more one-ofs like Clone, Tech. It is pretty strong as like a mid-range / full-on ramp late game powerhouse. And then we've got the winner of the 1K in Newan Blue. So the question is there anything new to the deck? Well, it doesn't really look like it. I mean, this looks literally just like the same deck, except with the addition of a couple of perilous positions. Outside of that, everything seems to remain the exact same. And honestly, that's kind of how I would have expected it to be. Like, you can maybe play a Kiadi Mundi. I wouldn't be surprised if you try to get that to work, but Poe Dameron is just so strong that I think I'd rather just keep Poe Dameron as the full 3 of instead of splitting or adding, the Kiadis into that spot. The 7 resource plays just so strong. Luke and Mace Windu. We honestly, a lot of people were thinking Newan Blue was just completely dead because of how many Tarkin Town decks are running around. And while Tarkin Town can be very good against Newan, it still has a lot of its strength in just being able to curve out really nicely with an advantaged curve. So I'm not surprised to see this do well. I think the main deck perilous positions is really important to deal with a lot of random stuff going around. And the Concord Dawn Interceptors are absolutely crucial against some of the space matchups. Outside of that, I mean, a turn earlier Luke can help you close out the game. Poe Dameron coming down on turn 3 instead of later, being able to start actually pinging off space units with attacks is pretty crazy as well. So I do think Newan Blue is still a solid deck, and I would still put it as one of the better decks. Not like S tier, for example, but definitely in that A tier for me. But then we got a couple of the classics that we've been seeing a ton of. CAD Bane Red, is there anything new here? Not really. We got the Zuckuss Forloms. We've got the little Jabbas to get our events. We've got, now there are 2 of them alongside an early Underworld curve. And then we have things like Ruthless Raider and Punishing One as our only aggression cards alongside a couple of events, including Daring Raid and Forced Choke. But this is pretty much standard CAD Bane. I put it at the end because alongside this, we have Sabine Green, which is also basically the same deck that we've been seeing. This one is playing the Yularen, and it did do pretty well for them. So pretty standard stuff, though. Nothing too crazy outside of that. They are playing the full 3 of Darksaber, I guess, which can be a little bit of an interesting one. And they are playing 2 of Rebel Pathfinder, which I find to be pretty strong against things like Crafty Smuggler as well. And then lastly, we've got Jango, which is basically the same Jango deck that we have been seeing. There is very, very little additions. I guess this one doesn't have a sideboard, which is something worth calling out. They are playing the 2 of CAD Bane main deck, which is not something that people usually play. Maybe they go 1 of or just all on the sideboard. But it's Jango Red, and that's what people are playing, so not surprised to see that as well. And this is pretty common. What this does do is show a very stable meta, and what I mean by that is this is what people are oftentimes running. And you'll see with these smaller tournaments, especially when there's not enough rounds like these. I don't know how many rounds they went. I guess I could check it out through Melee, but let me just go ahead and pull it up and see how many rounds they went, actually, if I could see it through Melee. Looks like they had a 5 round and then quarters, semifinals, and finals. So generally speaking, you know, with like over 100 player tournaments, you'll have way more rounds and things like, well, non-meta decks. Hey, FENNEC, for example, or like lower tier decks like Quinland Red or Yoda Blue or Palpatine Blue or Palpatine Green will have more time getting weeded out as you go through. And that's really important to kind of see a more stable, more consistent meta. Whereas we are still seeing random 1-ofs, 2-ofs, 3-ofs of leaders that are just popping up in the top spots. And that makes sense. In smaller tournaments, that tends to be the case. And, well, I also think that with the ban of Boba and the addition of set 3, we are able to see a little bit more upsetting than we were before because of just not having this one dominant leader that is not just played a lot, but also difficult to overcome if you ever come in contact with it. And that's something that's really important to remember. But that's going to wrap us up, guys. Let me know what you think about the meta in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about an old classic coming back. And is it back? Actually, is Newan actually good? Newan Blue, that is. Or are we still afraid of the Tarkin Towns? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.